turn a regular cake mix into something spectacular.
Let's see what's cooking. It's time for Yo-Yo Max 12.
Hello everyone, although this is a cherry flan jello cake recipe, you could use strawberry as well, as the original recipe asked for strawberry, but strawberry cake mix is actually hard to come by around here, so I used a cherry chip cake mix. And all I did was prepare it according to package directions by adding milk instead of water, though I added oil and eggs, and I added a little bit of pink food coloring just to make it a little bit more pink. And then I greased up a bundt pan and I poured the cake mix into the bottom of it as evenly as possible. And then you'll set that aside while we make the cream cheese layer, or the flan layer. So in a large mixing bowl, place 8 ounces of cream cheese at room temperature. And this is the very rare conjoined twin happy cream cheese. You hardly ever see this. Add in 4 eggs, 1 1/4 cups of just plain old milk, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. And you're going to blend that together until it's nice and smooth. Now, the recipe suggests you do this in a blender or food processor because it's hard to get that cream cheese broken down into small enough pieces so that it doesn't look chunky. But if you, my food processor is too small, and so is my blender for that matter. So I decided just to use the electric mixer, and it took a few minutes, but I did indeed manage to get it nice and smooth. And then I transferred it to a measuring cup with a spout, and then you gently pour it on top of that cake batter that's not baked yet. Gently pour it on top and as evenly as you can. And what's amazing about this cake recipe is that what's going to happen is that as this bakes, the cream layer and the cake layer are going to change positions. The cake layer is going to come up and the cream layer is going to go down. It's really quite amazing. So this recipe will fill up this bun pan right up to the top, and then you're going to cover it with aluminum foil, and then we're going to bake it at 350 degrees. Now you bake it like a cheesecake in a water bath. So that's a pan with hot water in it that comes up to about 2 inches up the sides of the bundt pan. And you're going to bake it for about an hour and 15 minutes until a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. And then you're going to let this thing cool completely and then chill the cake overnight in the refrigerator. You want this cake to be nice and cold. And then you unmold it, and as you can see, it looks great. The cream layer has changed positions with the cake. There's a bit of cake that got mixed in with the cream, but it actually just gives it a very interesting kind of a marbled kind of a look. Okay, now for the Jello layer. That's 2 cups of boiling water, and I used 2 packages of Jello. Now, I used 1 cherry, 1 strawberry because that's all I happen to have in the house, and it was also sugar-free. But I decided to use it anyway. I blended it in until it was dissolved, and then I added 2 additional cups of milk to this. And I just stirred it around until it was combined, and I let it cool a little bit. So that cake pan has been re-greased, the cake put back in to the pan. Now we're going to introduce that Jello, that liquid Jello in there. We want it to go in between the cake and the pan. So you put a piping bag or a plastic bag with the corner cut off, and you're going to shove it in between the cake and the pan, and you're going to pour in that liquid Jello mixture. Now I realized as I was doing this that the piping bag has to be quite deep down in that pan. So push it down so it's all the way to the bottom if you can. And then when you pour, you'll notice that the liquid is going to go underneath the cake. And I'm just showing you here. See how the cake is floating? The cake will actually float up. The Jello will float that cake up and you'll be able to move it freely. And then it says to use the rest of the Jello mixture and just pour it on top of the cake. And then you're supposed to refrigerate this until the Jello is set. And that's what I thought I did. Now the recipe said that you take your Jello mold out of the refrigerator, and to make it release easier from the pan, heat the pan up with a hairdryer to melt a little bit of the Jello and it'll come out. So that's why there's a hairdryer on the counter. But as it turns out, I didn't need a hairdryer. So here we go. I'm going to show you the unmolding, and I'm going to leave in some of the original audio.
Actually, I had one of these in the early 80s, and this one's a 1981 Honda XL 125S.
No!
It's a Honda, so it's really...
Oh! Now, when I bake in the kitchen, I usually listen to audiobooks or I'll watch YouTube videos or movies, and my iPad is on the counter while I'm cooking. That's what that noise was. I don't know why this happened. Could be that I didn't let it sit long enough in the refrigerator. Could be that because I used the sugar-free Jello. I'm not sure why, but it was a pretty spectacular fail, don't you think? All right, for try number 2, I took 2 cups of boiling water, and to that I added 2 packages of Cherry Jello, and it's the full sugar Jello this time. I stirred that in until it was completely dissolved, and then for extra protection I added in 1 envelope of unflavored gelatin, and I let that sit on the surface of the liquid for a bit, and then I stirred it in until it was completely dissolved. And instead of adding plain milk, I added 1 can of sweetened condensed milk to this mixture. And that was pretty much it. I didn't add anything else. I just stirred it in, and then I let it cool for a couple of minutes. And then I poured it into another measuring cup, just so it'd be easier to pour because it has a little spout on it. And then I did the same trick with the piping bag, and the cake floated up quite nicely. You may have to move your cake a little bit and get that gelatin mixture to go in a couple of different spots, but it actually works pretty awesome. The cake floats up and you get a nice layer of gelatin between the pan and the cake. And then you're going to let this set in the refrigerator for several hours. I let it sit there for several hours just to make sure. So this is really, really cold. I flipped it over. I was kind of hoping it would pop out on its own, but it didn't. So I decided to use the hairdryer trick that they recommended in the recipe that I was following. So I heated up the pan for a few minutes with the hairdryer, and the cake would not come out. It was not coming out. Now, I should have realized that it's a metal pan, quite a thick metal pan. It was probably going to take a few minutes for the heat to transfer through the pan and melt that Jello enough so that it could slide out. And then I thought, well, maybe I should run a knife along the edge of the Jello and the pan, because sometimes it's like a suction that's holding it in. If you can break the suction, the Jello will break away from the sides of the pan if you've ever done jelly molds before. That didn't work, so I set it into a sink of hot water for just maybe about 3 or 4 minutes, which was way, way too long. And this is what happened. Yeah, that heat finally transferred to the Jello, and it sure did, because the Jello melted like a lot. And there was a flood of Cherry Jello all over my counter. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking I have another fail, but then I'm kind of saying, well, it looks okay. It's a bit thin on the inside, but the rest of it looks all right. So I just picked it up carefully and I brought it and put it in the refrigerator just the way it was, just to try to get it to set. My refrigerator was full of Jello. My counter's full of Jello. I had lots of cleaning to do. But after I let it sit in the fridge, didn't take very long because the cake is so cold, and the Jello set up almost instantly when I put it in the fridge. All I did was clean up the edge of the pan with a knife and a clean paper towel, and there you have it. It actually looked really awesome after all of the trial and error that I had. It looked pretty good, and although the Jello is thin in a couple spots, it actually looks pretty awesome. So I was actually, after all of this, pretty happy with the way it ended up looking, and it was actually nice and shiny. I think it's because it had melted and had re-solidified that it was nice and shiny. And it also sliced beautifully. This slices so well, and you can see the lovely distinctive layers of the flan or the cream cheese layer in that cake, and the lovely Jello all the way around. It's a bit thin on the inside part where the hole of the bundt pan is, but overall it looked really, really good. It looked very impressive, and it tasted really good too. The cake as well, it's pretty much just a regular cake. The flan layer is like a cheesecakey kind of a flavor to it. And of course the Jello adds a nice texture and flavor on the outside. Super duper cherry flavor to this. If you love cherry, you'll love this. And you can also do it in strawberry. You can do it in pretty much any kind of flavor that you want. And really, when people see you slice into this, I mean, it looks spectacular. People are going to wonder how you did it. And you'll be able to tell them just how easy it was. Okay, well, it should be easy if you do it right the first time and you allow the proper chilling. And maybe, don't put it in a hot water bath for as long as I did. Put it in for a minute or two, take it out, try it. Then another 30 seconds, take it out and try it, and so on. I've always loved recipes that use cake mixes as a base. I just find them so interesting and so much fun. And I have a whole playlist where I've tried all different ways of taking a cake mix and adding other things to it to make it look spectacular or make it look really delicious. So if you want to see this playlist, go ahead and click on your screen. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.